welcome back to Spotlight, where we feature the University of Central Arkansas's College of Fine Arts and Communication. I'm Donna Lampkin-Stevens. Today we have a different sort of show. It's a CFAC residency, but my friend Dr. Raymond Fontaine, who is a professor of English, is here to talk about the residency of Terrence McNally. He's one of the world's great playwrights.
Yes.
So Raymond, I guess you are, is it fair to say you're the foremost scholar on Terrence McNally?
Well, I wouldn't say that, but at the moment, I think I've written the most on him.
Okay.
The largest number of articles.
Okay, well, give us a little background on Terrence McNally first. Let's tell the audience who is actually coming and who they can have a chance to see.
Yeah, Terrence McNally is one of the richest talents in American theater. I would say since Tennessee Williams and Edward Albee, although I know some people will argue with that, because he has been writing consistently, continuously for over 50 years. His first play premiered on Broadway in 1965.
Wow.
And ironically, it was universally panned by the New York critics. One critic said, "Would that Mr. and Mrs. McNally had smothered their child in his crib, then he had lived to write this atrocity." And then went on to get every detail of the play wrong, showing how little attention he had actually paid to the play. Thank God that his parents hadn't done that, because McNally has gone on. He started out writing a series of incredibly biting satiric plays. Since he began writing in 1965, this was at the height of the anti-Vietnam War movement, and his first great success was a play, Next, that starred James Coco and ran off Broadway for 2.5 years and made the career of both the actor and the playwright.
Oh, yeah.
But then he went on to a series of incredibly outrageous farces. The Ritz, which won a Tony Award for Rita Moreno, was set in a gay bathhouse, that you have a Fadovian farce with all of these lines of doors, people going in and out of each door, and all of these confused identities. But half the cast are half-naked men draped with towels, and it ran for 1.5 years.
Wow.
It was an incredible success. And I think only McNally could have pushed the envelope in a way that you bring people who would normally resist this kind of play, they're fighting to get a ticket to see it.
That's great.
Yeah, but then the AIDS epidemic came along, and in the late 80s, McNally shifted gears and began writing some of the most exquisitely lyrical dramas we've had since Tennessee Williams. Frankie and Johnny and the Claire de Lune, Lips Together, Teeth Apart, A Perfect Ganesh, Love, Valor, Compassion. They are all plays that deal with the human need for connection. There's a haunting scene in Frankie and Johnny where they are making an omelet in the kitchen, and she cuts her finger, and he impulsively takes her finger and sucks the blood before bandaging it. And this was done just at the moment that we found out that HIV was communicated through bodily fluids. Audiences gasped at that moment in the play, because for McNally, it's not that intimacy threatens us, it's the absence of intimacy which threatens to destroy us. And you have to have the courage to persevere in relationships and not be frightened by the threat of HIV. And so for 4 or 5 plays, he just dominated the New York theater scene. Year after year, he had another extraordinary play dealing with the importance of connection and what happens when you build walls of fear and prejudice. So.
Very timeless topics.
They are, and so the plays are are continue to be done around the country. Love, Valor, Compassion is one of the great AIDS plays. I mean, there's only Larry Kramer's The Normal Heart and Tony Kushner's Angels in America, which are produced as often as Love, Valor, Compassion continues to be.
Well, McNally will be here December 2nd through 4th.
Yes.
And let's talk a little bit about the schedule. This is, as you said, the 50th anniversary of his first Broadway play. So it's very timely, and we have a big weeks set up. December 2nd, UCA theater students are producing a night of Terrence McNally plays in the Festival of One Act Plays. So he will be there to see his plays put on by UCA Theater. How exciting!
Yeah, and it is because he's written 20 or 30 one-act plays, but these 4 were selected by the students themselves. So I'm curious to see what appealed to them in these texts and what they're able to do with them.
And so that will be I believe the second night of the Festival of One Acts, but McNally will be there, and then there will be a discussion session afterwards.
Yes.
So that'll be great for the audience to be on the stage.
He'll go up on stage for a talk back with the actors themselves if they want criticism or feedback about their choices, and then any questions that audience members have about the plays.
And on December, let's see, the schedule is December 3rd. Tell us, we have Craft Talk.
Yes, that will be with UCA theater students in the afternoon, which is open only to students, but open to the public. If you're a subscriber, a supporter of Arkansas Shakespeare Theater, there is a reception at President Courtway's Mansion on Donaghy Avenue. For which tickets are still available, a reception honoring Mr. McNally. And then this precedes his public address at 7:30 in the College of Business Auditorium. He'll be speaking on his life in the theater.
Oh, wonderful.
And then he'll speak for 45 minutes, and then we'll have 30 minutes of questions from the audience.
Oh, great.
And this is a man who has known them all. He has, at dinner, I have heard his stories about the first time he had brunch with Katharine Hepburn, or when he was seated next to Helen Hayes at the funeral for Colleen Dewhurst. And he has he's had a full life in the New York theater, and he has wonderful stories to tell.
So that will be, the public address is free, and no tickets are required. And the final event of the residency will be on Friday, December 4th, and that is you're going to interview him at the Little Rock Central Visitor Center. Contemporary opera and social justice, an interview with Terrence McNally. So talk a little bit about his love of opera.
Yes. When McNally grew up in Corpus Christi, Texas, 1956, he came up to New York as a freshman at Columbia University, the journalism program, by the way, although he switched to English by the end of his 4 years there. But dropped his bags off in the dormitory and went to Midtown to see what he could get a ticket to that evening.
Oh, great.
So he would go out 4 evenings a week. There were student discount tickets in the 1950s. There were standing room only tickets that were very inexpensive. But he would go to the Met. He was there for Maria Callas's American debut. And eventually, his love of opera, because of his love of opera, he was invited to be one of the Quiz Bowl members during the intermissions at the Live from the Met. That was broadcast on Saturday afternoons on the radio. And so he would answer questions about opera and comment upon the current schedule at the Met. He has written, of course, 3 plays about opera, Lisbon Traviata and Masterclass, Both are wonderful celebrations of the talent of Maria Callas and the role that she's played in the American imagination. But one of his most recent plays, Golden Age, is set at the opening of Bellini's final opera, I Puritani, in Paris in 1835, and it's what's taking place backstage as the performers are struggling to come to grips with their performances. And so he has both done plays about opera and in the past 20 years has also been doing libretti for operas. Dead Man Walking, for which he wrote the libretto, is based upon the memoir by Sister Helen Prejean and is with music by Jake Heggie, and is widely viewed as one of the most important new American operas of the past 25 years and has entered the repertoire of most opera companies in the U.S. He's coming to us fresh upon the premiere, and it's this week, I haven't heard the details, of a new comic opera that he wrote, Great Scott, music again by Jake Heggie, and it was commissioned by the Dallas Grand Opera. And so I'm curious to hear how that fared.
And that's going to really tie in with what UCA has recently gotten the signatures of, I guess I can announce that here, of Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr. and Tanya Leone we have commissioned the Little Rock Nine opera, so it'll be a great setting there to talk about the tool of opera as a way to get across these social justice issues.
Yes.
So,
and
I'm
one
excited.
doesn't associate opera with contemporary social issues. That Dead Man Walking, I don't know where it stands in the opera canon, but it was unusual in that regard. It's very often performed, when it's performed around the country, there'll be an evening which is a benefit for the local anti-capital punishment movement.
And so it's going to be a busy residency, and I believe there's another luncheon as well, another address by his partner.
His partner, his husband, Tom Curtihy, is also the producer, the lead producer of his most recent plays, and has been repeatedly quoted in the New York Times on the way, on what is going on the Broadway theater. What is the audience for a play today? How does one market a play in this economic climate? So Tom Curtihy will be doing a luncheon in which he gives an informal address on the economics of Broadway, how to produce a Broadway play, and we're excited to bring that
as part of the residency
aspect to the UCA campus, because we don't have any classes on the economics of the arts, and this is bringing a nice part of the experience to our students.
So when is that? That has been added to the schedule,
That has been added, and again, that is for students only. It's not open to the public, and that will be mostly classes in which McNally's plays are being studied this semester. So there's a theater arts class involved. My intro to drama class is involved with that.
Okay, now Raymond, how did a University of Central Arkansas professor become the world expert on Terrence McNally?
Well, again, I'm embarrassed by that by that description, but I was so taken by McNally's plays during the AIDS epidemic because of personal experience, the loss of friends, caring for, when I was the faculty sponsor for the Gay and Lesbian Student Alliance on campus, we had care groups for two of our members who had been thrown out by their families for being gay, and one student was living in a car in the Donaghy parking lot. And as their illnesses progressed, and this is before protease inhibitors made AIDS a manageable condition, because of these experiences, when I first saw Terence's Andre's Mother, and then Frankie and Johnny, Lips Together, Teeth Apart, and then finally Love, Valor, Compassion. I was moved by his plays as I was, in ways I was not moved by Tony Kushner or by Larry Kramer, which were much more politically in your face sorts of drama. McNally has always said you change minds by changing hearts first. If you can bring your audience to empathize with the plight of the characters, this is how you get them to change their mind about social issues. Don't hit them over the head arguing right and wrong. So I began writing about McNally, and one article was in the Gay and Lesbian Review, which Terence's husband, Tom, happened to read. And he was so taken aback by he liked the article so much. He thought that I was speculating on Terence's musical, A Man of No Importance, having been written in response to the controversy that erupted over the play Corpus Christi, which is one of the most deeply religious plays of the 20th century. And religious extremists who had not read the play were just so outraged by the thought of it. There were death threats, bomb threats at the theater. McNally had death threats at one time. And instead of being angry and, like Larry Kramer, going on his soapbox and speechifying about this, McNally writes a musical about a man in 1950s Dublin who's doing an Oscar Wilde play with an amateur theater group at the church hall of his local parish, and they censor him because it's by Oscar Wilde. That automatically makes it offensive to local morals. And I thought it was the most moving way for an artist to respond to a controversy, to do a play that doesn't say, I'm right and you're wrong, but instead to try to analyze both sides of the issue, why some people just become nervous at the suggestion of homosexuality and the Bible, for example. So Tom read this article and startled me by phoning and inviting me to the opening of a play
But you
in
weren't
New York.
there to take the phone call.
No, I wasn't. It was UCA spring break. I was on a research trip to Toronto. And he told me later, he thought, well, who is this little twerp in Arkansas who cannot condescend to answer my reply to my message, to my invitation? But when I got back to town and found the phone message, I called immediately and found out that the invitation still held, and I've been invited to openings since then.
So you fly to New York. You're at your very first Broadway opening. Tell us about that night.
Yes. Well, I had no idea how this operates. They told me just pick the ticket up at the box office. So I go to the box office half expecting they won't know who I am. I'll have made this trip for nothing. And he says, no, I have a ticket for you. And I can tell if it's row E, that's fifth row from the stage. I mean, that's a good seat. When I go into the theater that evening, I'm seated 3 seats down from Edward Albee and across the aisle from Nathan Lane. And I was just sort of shirking down in my seat, afraid that they gave me the wrong ticket, that I should not be seated with these theater luminaries. But then was invited as well. But Tom Curdy, he and Terence they knew what seat I was in. They came over and introduced themselves just before the curtain went up.
Wow.
And said, we hope you'll join us for the opening night party. And so went and just stood against the wall looking at legendary theater people just walking by.
And that night started this long, because you've done a lot of work on
I've
McNally.
continued writing about him. I have a book which is...
Talk about that. Brand new. Oh, two books.
What?
Yeah.
Yes, I have my own book,
Okay.
a reading of McNally's plays in terms of the notion of grace, which is 90% completed. It's just the converting older computer files and
Yeah.
into current program, but writing the conclusion.
When will that be out?
Well, I suspect January 1st I'll submit it to the press.
Okay,
So
okay.
we'll see if they want to
Okay.
publish. It's 175,000 words when academic publishers are saying 100,000 words is our limit. So I may have some cutting to do. But it will be the first exhaustive study of McNally's
Oh,
plays. And because he's given me access to all of his papers, working with a lot of his unpublished works as well.
Oh, yeah.
So, and he gave me access to his unpublished work because, as part of his 50th anniversary on Broadway, Grove Press gave him a career capstone volume. His selected works were published this summer, this July, and they're on sale in the UCA bookstore and will be for sale after the Thursday evening lecture.
And a book signing.
And a book
Okay.
signing if people want to bring their copies for McNally's autograph.
And you were the editor.
I am the textual editor.
Okay, okay.
So I simply prepared the texts of the plays. We had a grant that paid for a graduate student for 2 years to retype so many of these plays, which were originally done on a manual typewriter decades ago.
And he apparently did not see the need to save them for posterity.
He puts things in boxes. And then I'm not certain he remembers what's in the boxes. So every so often he'll contact me. Did you photocopy? Because ultimately his papers have been archived at the Ransom Library,
Okay.
the Humanities Research Center in Austin, Texas, which has the largest repository of American theater papers. Tennessee Williams, David Mamet, Edward Albee's papers are all there, John Steinbeck's. So McNally's are there now, but he remembers having written something. Didn't I write a play about? Time Daily is going to do an evening of my plays. I think that play would be good for Time Daily. Do you have a copy of it? Because I wind up having to photocopy things that I want to write about. So I've edited 3 collections of McNally's works. Did the textual editing for the Grove Press volume, which is out. We have a second volume, which is all of his previously unpublished plays. Most of them are one actors, but there are some full-length plays like Crucifixion, which was done in San Francisco, but never made it to New York. And this should be done by Smith and Krause, we hope, or I hope, which has already published 2 volumes of McNally's work, so they're the logical publisher for this. And then I'm now trying to finish up an edition of his essays about theater.
Okay.
Most of them were presented where he was the keynote speaker at the League of American Theater Producers, for example, or gave the commencement address at Juilliard 1 year. So they are lovely, stunning essays on the nature of theater. And I think one of the reasons not as many people are writing about McNally as should be, not as many academics, is that scholars don't have access to these essays.
Oh, sure. And now they will.
And I hope within another year they will.
Now, Raymond, you have attempted multiple times to bring McNally to campus, and this is, and it's finally happened. So let's
It's happening,
talk
yes.
about how long that process has been. You've got to be just thrilled to death to have him here.
Well, it's the problem is the clash of 2 worlds,
Yes.
of 2 totally different cultures. That academe, we have the start of a semester and the
Yes.
end of the semester, and all of our business has to be conducted in this period. Whereas in the theater world, McNally's schedule is constantly changing. That, I'll be startled that I'm flying up to New York. We're going to work on one of these volumes, And I get an email the day before I leave. I have to go to Amsterdam. They've made a musical out of A Perfect Ganesh. It's opening, and they've just invited me. The producers are flying me over for the opening. So when you have this kind of incredibly busy theater career,
Yeah.
trying to pin someone down.
Particularly far enough in advance to get
Yes.
to get publicity and get classes scheduled and that
Yeah.
kind of
For
thing.
example, he was coming last April, and everything seemed set until it was. And I don't know who made this discovery. He had a musical, the last musical with John Kander and Fred Ebb, the team that wrote Cabaret and Chicago, with whom McNally collaborated on Kiss of the Spider Woman, one of his great successes. They had written a musical version of Dürrenmatt's The Visit, one of the really edgy plays of the night of post-war Europe. And to turn this into a musical is just it took a radical leap of faith. But they had Chita Rivera, who had starred in two of their earlier musicals. So this is an old team that has worked together. They know each other's strengths and weaknesses. And they wanted to finally bring the musical to Broadway. It had opened in Chicago in August 2001 and was coming to New York. It would have been a month after 9/11. And it's such a dark, edgy musical, people were afraid New York couldn't handle it. So it was postponed. Everyone went off to another project. Freddie Ebb died. So they finally brought it to New York this spring, and it was it was a glorious production. And Chita Rivera gave a magnificent performance. But to make it, they had to open by April 24th to make it in under the wire for Tony Award, the deadline for Tony Award nominations. And that was the night he was supposed to be at UCA. And so we thought we had things set up. And then, sorry, he has to be there for the opening of his musical, of course.
But this has worked out well because the students in the directing class have been able to
Yes.
study McNally's plays all semester.
Yes.
And this is going to be the highlight, the culmination of their class.
Yes.
How-
That most of the students are doing this as their senior project, I understand, the Festival of One Acts. And so to actually have the playwright in the audience for your
What a fabulous
performance.
opportunity.
And he's very generous in his in the time that I, for example, was invited to give the academic lecture at Chapman University in Los Angeles 2 years ago, where they were doing a McNally festival, and they put on an evening of McNally plays, and then the local theater was doing Corpus Christi, and each time McNally was very frank with the actors, with the directors, about what he felt worked or what he questioned. Why did you make this decision? But then also just sitting, talking, and answering questions about how American theater has changed in the 50 years that he has been involved. That he started off-Broadway, Broadway, moving back to off-Broadway, has been playwright in residence at regional theaters around the country, and has had a phenomenal career.
And continuing, I mean, I think we said 77. I mean, he's
Yes, he is. Well, the past 12 months, he's had revival of It's Only a Play on Broadway, which sucked all the oxygen last fall out of Broadway because it reunited Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick and included Stockard Channing and F. Murray Abraham and Rupert Grint, the little red-haired boy from the Harry Potter movies, his Broadway debut. So it was a stunning cast, and it sold out for the run of the play. Then in spring he opened I'm sorry, he had Mothers and Sons, his most recent drama starring Tyne Daly. And then they opened the musical of with Chita Rivera, the Visit, which had been reduced from a 3-act play, which you could pull off in the late 90s, early 2000s, but Broadway audiences will not sit through 2 intermissions these days. They're much more impatient. So it was reduced, it was compressed to a 90-minute single-act musical, which gave it a much more intense dramatic through line. And just left audiences gasping. I won't spoil the the ending, but the final moment of the play was exquisite. So he's extremely active. Just had an opera open in Dallas, which I assume will be brought up into one of the New York opera companies will do it. So yes, he's extremely active.
And it's going to be a busy week because you're going to be his sponsor for all practical purposes. And has he been to Arkansas? I understand he's going to spend the weekend.
No, I don't believe he has ever been to Arkansas before.
So,
but he's very. When I first invited him and was trying to lure him, I know he enjoys touring. When he travels, he likes to go out and see what's there. So the 2 places he particularly asked to see are the Clinton Presidential Library, and because he was just starting college when the Central High desegregation battle was being fought. This is something which is part of his consciousness, and he had asked to see Central High School. At the time, I did not know that UCA was involved. Gail Seymour was involved in sponsoring the writing of a new opera on the Little Rock Nine, and that this would fit in perfectly with their plans. So
it's meant to be.
Yes.
I think it's better. It's better now than it would have been in April.
I suspect so. I hope so.
All right, so it's December 2nd through 4th.
Yes.
Many of these events are available to the public.
All of the evening events.
All the evening events are available to the public. The Festival of One-Act Plays, let's see, include Bringing It All Back Home.
Which is a Vietnam War protest play.
Botticelli.
Again, a anti-war play from the 60s.
Noon.
Is a sexual farce, and I am delighted to see that they are trying to do that. It's about a group of people who answer an ad in a counterculture magazine, newspaper, and show up at noon at the agreed spot, and they've all been promised the time of their life, but none of them are sexually compatible, so it makes for an outrageous farce about the nature of desire.
And Dusk.
Dusk is a haunting 3-character play. 2 women and a man meet on the beach at dusk, and it's McNally's first play in which he talks about the need for human connection.
Very good. And all that is on Wednesday, December 2nd. There's a list of McNally residency activities on the UCA CFAC website. So I encourage everyone to come out and take part. This is a wonderful experience, wonderful opportunity.
Yes. We don't get theater personalities of McNally's caliber
Excellent.
at UCA very often.
Raymond, thank you for your work in getting him here and for coming on Spotlight with us.
My pleasure.
We'll be back again in a moment.